Bookworms Horror Podcast is sponsored by Creepy Crate. Creepy Crate is a horror and true crime subscription box filled with spooky collectibles, macabre accessories, and terrifying goodies. Each bi-monthly box is filled with over $85 of terror and includes at least one horror or true crime book. This box delivers dread to your doorstep for just $39.99 with free shipping. Go to creepycrate.store to subscribe. Use the code bookworm5 at checkout to get $5 off your subscription. That's bookworm5 for $5 off your subscription. And now to the show. Welcome to Bookworms Horror, the podcast that offers you tips on writing, especially in the horror genre. My name is James Ippoliti. I am the host of the Real Demons of Pop Culture podcast. This week's episode is all about Night of the Living Dead and zombies. If you haven't yet picked up Bookworms Horror Zine, you can get it in the Etsy link in the show notes. There are only a very little amount of issue 1, the premiere issue, left at a discount at $5 with free shipping. But issue 2 is still available, so go to the show notes, check it out. In this week's episode, Regina and I discuss finding ideas for your horror fiction. Regina is a Waddy Award winner for Best Horror Novel, as well as multiple screenwriting awards, including a Webby honoree. Regina is also the contributing editor of the best-selling Local Haunts, a horror tube anthology. Find Regina and her alter ego, Batilda, at her booktube channel, Regina's Haunted Library, and on her blog, rstclair.com. Regina and myself are the editors of the Bookworms Horror Zine, and since we're seeking great horror fiction for bookworms, we created this weekly podcast to offer writers quick tips on writing for the genre. Find all our links in the show notes. Now let's jump into my conversation with Regina as she speaks with me from her haunted library. So this week we're going to talk about finding ideas for your story, specifically horror related, not just any ideas. And do you have a place you go for, Regina, for your ideas?
Not specifically. I think most of my ideas generate from within, but that's also filtered through things that I'm interested in. So if I, like, for example, my new book's coming out soon, Carney. Mm-hmm. I use the location of Burlington Island, which is a real place.
Oh, wait, is it set in that time period too?
Well, some of it is, and then it's like a flashback, but it's about a haunted carnival, like the bones of an old carnival.
Let's pause and explain to our listeners what Burlington Island is if they don't know because they're not from this area.
Burlington Island is, I think it's 1,000-acre island between Bristol, Pennsylvania, and Burlington, New Jersey. It actually belongs to the state of New Jersey. And it has a long history going back to the early settlements, but it was a pretty well-established amusement park in, like, around the turn of the century into, I think, the 1930s. And people used to ferry across, and they had a huge roller coaster.
Yeah, it was like a Coney Island.
Yes, it was like a Coney Island. Like, it was huge. And it burned down, and I actually, in the 30s, and then, or in the 20s, they tried to rebuild it, and then it kind of failed. But I used that fire and that destruction as a plot point in my book. So Burlington Island's cool. Right now it's been empty. There were some houses that still existed on it. Like, people lived there, I think, through the 1970s. And now it's just an open space that's currently being cleaned up. We have bald eagles nesting over there. I think the state of New Jersey tried to turn it into a trash dump, which would have been horrible.
That would have been awful.
So hopefully that's not going to happen. But so that's where one idea came from.
Yeah, and so that, if you want to look it up, it's like at early after all the fire and stuff, there were like it was an abandoned amusement park, and you can see photos of people who trekked over
Mm-hmm.
there and took pictures of all the remnants of the amusement park. So that's really exciting. That
Yeah, and there's still some skeleton of some
hmm
amusements over there. I've not
yeah.
been there yet. I know a couple people here in town with boats, so I'm going to see if I can bribe them to take me over there someday. There's also
Yeah,
a
so there.
Friends of Burlington Island organization that I probably should get involved in that goes over and cleans it up. So I would do that, you know.
Yeah, and it seems that you do take things from the surrounding area. I
Yes.
mean, Dark Hollow is Dark Hollow Road.
Yeah.
So like you're inspired a lot by where you grew up and where you live.
Yes. I definitely. I mean, I think you should write when they say like write what you know.
Yeah.
I think that can be interpreted different ways, but if you really know an area well, like even when I wrote my book about fashion victims, it was a lot about New York, and I lived in New York for 10 years in Manhattan.
Right.
So I knew the streets, but I pulled up the maps and made sure that I was talking about, the right street, and there was that restaurant there and that kind of thing. Like, um, that's something I aim for. I'm just trying to think of any other ideas that kind of came out of,
Well, some
you know.
people look in newspapers.
hmm
Do you look in like read articles and get inspired for writing a story that way?
Well, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I do read the Daily Mail every morning.
Actually,
There's
I
all kinds of
appreciate
crazy
that because you
stories.
send me the crazy stuff,
I
and then
do.
I'll do a
Sorry about
TikTok,
it.
and that was the one TikTok you sent me, and it went crazy. It was
Oh, yeah.
was it the vampire one you sent me?
Oh, when they found the vampire. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was a new one that just came up. They found a child vampire in the same area, and the other
Mm.
one was a woman.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate you read that.
Well, that's a crazy tabloid, and they have a lot of course celebrity stuff and like all that, but it also comes up with those odd, some Egyptian mummy was found, and this kind
hmm
of thing. And I love that kind of stuff. And so definite ideas from that. I tend not to do too many like real life murder kind of things. There's a lot of there's
Like true crime.
like true crime. Uh yes. No. No, I haven't really done. I listen to a lot of podcasts about the occult.
hmm
So, definite some ideas about that. I watched a really scary movie the other day. I don't know, James, have you seen this movie? It's a found footage film. It's about 10 years old. It's called Final Prayer. It's also called The Borderlands, and it's a British film, so American
I have
title's
not
Final
seen
Prayer.
it.
It's really good. It's really creepy if you like religious occult horror. And that movie kind of made me do some research about ancient pagan rites and stuff like that. So I think if you're always curious and you're reading a lot, I found a book at a thrift store the other day about uh, King Tut's tomb, so I was reading that. So those ideas kind of come just from reading a lot and watching, uh, listen to podcasts, reading tabloids, that kind of stuff.
Is there anything you think is taboo? Because we're
Mm,
talking about horror, and we could talk about getting ideas for just writing in general. But when you're talking about horror, you're looking for something that either is suspenseful or frightening, possibly revolting. Do you think there are taboos that should be avoided, or do you? I mean, I don't think things should be censored, but I'm just saying.
mhm.
Personally, do you feel that way?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, I don't. There was just I don't know if you paid attention a couple weeks ago. There was a big drama going on in the extreme horror community. I don't know if you heard about that.
I haven't.
I don't want to name any names because it concerned a booktuber and an author, and it opened up a discussion about extreme horror, which is not something that I enjoy.
Can we define what that genre is?
I I mean, I would say it is all like the taboos that you were saying. Just it doesn't have any. it doesn't hold back anything. In fact, I think the author, one of the books that was brought up was dealt with like child abuse. And I mean, I don't want to read about that stuff,
Right.
And apparently he decided only to sell it on his Etsy site, which doesn't censor it, but that he couldn't sell it on Amazon. So there are people, and it's no judgment against the author or people who consume it, because I know people that I would trust with a lot, who love extreme horror, and they're like good, decent people. So it kind of got into that question, about what kind of mind would write this, or what kind of mind would consume this. It's not my bag. I'm not into it, but I've written some pretty extreme scenes, and what I would consider, and there are lines that I don't cross, because I don't anything with like children and animals doesn't really, I guess that's the line. But yeah, I wouldn't do anything that was what I consider, like, I do have a sense of like morality in my horror. There's a certain type, and a lot of times this is extreme horror, that's very nihilistic. And
right.
like Poppy Z. Bright, who I actually really like that author's work, but even some of that, I read that not Lost Souls, what was the one, Exquisite Corpse.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as extreme as I want to go, and there are people that go a lot more extreme than that, I guess. So yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, because where would you draw the line from Stephen King, who talks about some things that maybe a childhood story that he puts in there that something happened? Mm-hmm. Is it the quality? Like if you're someone like James Joyce and we're writing extreme horror, do you think that if you can do it in a way that is artful, then it's okay, as opposed to just writing
smut
things for this? Yeah, I guess you can say.
Well,
that.
I mean, I think anything's okay. It's just not something that, like, I don't believe in censorship. I mean, unless it's like a calling for some kind of violent, I don't know.
Yeah, we're not talking about like something where
we're talking about fiction.
People. Yeah.
No, I just sometimes it's done artfully and very well, and sometimes it's just really crap. But I feel like there's a real audience for that.
Yeah, there is an audience for that,
but I'm not it.
What you're into. Yeah, I mean, if you're into that, and that's fine. I think it really comes down to, do you have character and story? Mm-hmm. Because if it's just violence for violence sake and there's really no character growth and everything, it's, you're now just bordering on just writing, like you said, smut.
Well, I think a lot of, now I'm not, I haven't read that much, so I'm not an expert, but I think a lot of what would be considered extreme horror, or given that label, might just be that, like what you were saying. It doesn't have, I think it's written, right. I think it's written very fast. It's not edited. It's just put out there and people consume it because they enjoy it for whatever reason. But I think any story, if you have really good characters, and a good story applies to any form of literature, and good character development.
Yeah.
Just, but I think if something doesn't have any kind of, now other people could disagree with me, any kind of moral arc at all, and it's just a nihilistic, and then this would happen, and this happened, and this happened, and there's no struggle, there's no human struggle for any kind of goodness, that's a boring story to me.
I don't know if I would consider it boring. I think if you're writing it well enough that you leave that question up to the reader. And this, you'd have to be very skilled.
Yes. And like Poppy Z. Bright, that author's very skilled with that. So it's very well done.
Because I am okay with reading something that you're like, at the end, you're like, huh.
Yeah.
And it gets you thinking, is that something, like if you get that reader questioning, I think that's interesting. And I'm all for like sort of, I'd love to read science fiction where the aliens kick our butts and there's no like, because I find it silly when all these science fiction things where it's more like America's gonna save the day. Like, come on, they would kick our butts.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. I mean, I don't think I'm not saying that has to have a happy ending and that the hero's got to win at the end, because I mean, a lot of my books have ended on that horror downer ending, which I think that's part of the genre, is the downer ending.
Yeah, I think The Mist by Stephen King has one of the most downer endings, especially the movie.
Actually, this movie,
the way they did it,
that I was telling you about, the final prayer of Borderlands, that reminded me a lot of The Mist.
And I don't know if I like the ending of The Mist.
I remember being disappointed. I think I saw that movie for the first time with you at my studio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had never seen it. And I was like, that, oh my gosh, that's how it ends.
Yeah, I just didn't agree with the characters and their decisions because I felt like, no, I wouldn't. I don't know. It just irritated me. And I remember it was way back when I was doing the podcast way back, the original This Is Some Scene, because my friend at the time, Doug, and I did a whole email. Yeah, we did a whole email thread because he loved it and I didn't. And we argued at that point. But we're getting off topic. I'm trying to just thinking about getting ideas for horror.
Right.
And I will say that there are no original thoughts. I mean, you can make it your own, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting ideas inspired by, like, let's say you love the book Carrie and you want to do something about telekinesis, right? Like, that's not stealing.
No,
like
I was just watching. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a great book called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And it really does talk about, like great artists steal.
Sure. I was watching another De Palma film. It was after Carrie, I think, was The Fury. Remember that one?
Yeah.
With Amy Irving. And that's about like it's different from Carrie, but it's about telekinesis and it's based on a book. And that was a popular topic that was exploring like ESP and this kind of stuff in the late 70s. And we can always go back and revisit some of that stuff. I mean, how many haunted house stories have there been?
Yeah.
There's always new ways of doing it.
Yeah, you can always find something that might be run into the ground and figure a way of making it no longer cliche.
Yeah. And it's hard to do that, but I think maybe this is another topic. It's like genre expectation and subgenre expectation is important without being so done to death that everyone knows what's going to happen before it happens.
Yeah. Some people advise, think of a character and then think of sort of a situation, a what if situation, and taking that character and putting them in that what if situation, but then make them so like a kindergarten teacher that is maybe at a sleepaway camp, like, and then you can say, what if a kindergarten teacher took her kids to a sleepaway camp and had to protect them, and like, these are ways of getting idea, is just writing down all these ideas. So Jaws, for example, would be, what if a police chief moves to an island and it's threatened by a shark that is killing people and he has to save them? That's all that story is.
Right.
And then they expand on that.
Right. And I think that's also a great way to explore character, is taking someone out of their element and finding out who they really are versus just their role in society.
Right. And you want to avoid, you don't have to, but what you had just said, the ones you would be like, ex-cop ends up in Iraq and has to fight his way back, like, and save prisoners of war. Like, it's very cliche and we know that story already.
Yeah.
So take somebody who's not like an ex-cop, somebody who has no skill in that, and put them in Iraq or something.
Yeah. Although I love Predator. love that movie.
Yeah, but Predator,
It's a,
I feel that was an original.
it's an original monster for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's a great. I love Predator. I can't say anything bad about Predator, but I think it was unique enough. You know what I mean? An original. It was actually really cool. Like you get this new monster.
Yeah.
So you're taking that idea, but you're like, let's throw the idea that there is just a hunter who's from another planet coming to hunt us. Like it's just a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and that's always a scary monster. Is the Jaws monster? No, there's no moral compass. They just want to eat. And
yeah,
if you're in the way, you'll get eaten.
They compared terrorism with the movie Jaws by saying the reason why you fear terrorism is the same reason you fear going in the ocean. Is like they're out there, and you know that they can attack you, but you'll never see it coming. And so you think you're safe in the water, but there could be something out there that might get you. And that's kind of what terrorism is all about, is this. It's not about actually the event. It's about the fear of the event. Right. And that's how we feel about going in the ocean. It's like, okay, like it was interesting because being up at Cape Cod last week.
Did you swim?
I didn't go in the ocean. But
did you go in the pond?
I was there.
I saw the picture.
You'll see,
I know,
I'm going to post
awesome.
the video. But it was interesting. Not many people were in the water. Now, there have been a lot of sharks right around Cape Cod. And that's because apparently they're saving the seals now or something like that. So now they're overpopulated, like up there. And the sharks are like coming now because there's all this seal food.
Yeah, that's like when you change that, when humans mess with that ecosystem, sometimes it backfires.
Yeah, and so now we have a lot of sharks. I did meet a guy who actually worked on Jaws. We were in Woods Hall, and he built the cabanas on the beach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really cool. We were talking to him.
Is the slapping lady, is she still around? Or
she's dead.
Oh, she died.
Yeah, I met her, but as Lee Ferrero.
Did she slap you?
No, so that was her thing. She would slap you if you went up. And so I met her, and I said, can you slap me? And she's like, I stopped doing that, but I'm giving hugs now, so I got a hug.
Oh, that's nice.
I'd rather have been slapped.
That's funny.
But, yeah, so I mean, I think you can find these ideas around you by looking at maybe what scares us in real life and how can we make that interesting.
Yeah, or hearing like I was just listening to a podcast this morning about it was like a 4chan thread about these towns that people wandered into that had no people, and like they weren't, like, it was almost like time slips. And I think that, I mean, Stephen King has certainly explored that. I think that's always a good idea, like the time slip of stepping into beyond the veil. And that could be lots of different things, wandering into the portal. It's been explored, but I think that there's still fun things to explore about that. So I think the ideas are everywhere.
I think your advice on reading and watching is, I think you need to consume a lot of information and then you need to be quiet for some time.
Yeah, no, that's good advice.
And let that kind of percolate.
Yeah, because you don't want to just say, oh, I like that, let me just copy that. No, you have to let it resonate within you.
Yeah. And then your subconscious will do a lot of work on, and then it'll rise when you're in the shower. You'll all of a sudden be like, bing, there it is.
Yeah.
There's the idea.
Yeah, and I think some people keep a journal. Sometimes I write things down on my phone when I think of it, and then I'll read it later and I won't know what the heck I was, what that code means, but so probably wasn't that important. But
yeah, try to be a little bit more detailed.
Yeah, try to be a little more detailed. But yeah, I mean, the ideas are everywhere. And I have a lot of ideas. It just takes a long time to write a book. Short stories are good for that. Just get it out.
Yeah, I think that's also great practice, and also a way you can find out if the story has more or doesn't. Like, a lot of people get an idea and they'll think it's going to be a novel, and maybe there just isn't enough there.
Right.
So starting as a short story, you'll know, okay, wait a minute, this is not a short story anymore, it's a novella. And then you like say, well, it's actually more than that. But starting small is actually a great way of practicing and determining whether that's going to be a novel or not.
Right. I mean, I think like you could take any idea, like like write a short story about a haunted toy. That's certainly been done, but it can be cool to stretch your imagination and see how can I explore this in a different way that isn't the while still using like some elements of like Chucky, or like Chucky took a lot from Trilogy of Terror.
Yeah.
And there's something really scary about some little thing like running across
So when
the floor. Like try to like tap into the things that make it scary and then but put your own spin on it.
When I was talking to Grady Hendrix about the new book he has, it's How to Sell a Haunted House.
Yeah.
His stuff, that's exactly what he's doing is dolls. And he does a really great job of like very subtle realizing like, all right, the doll's here, and then they come back and it's not there, or it's something's different about it, like very subtle things.
I haven't read that one yet.
It's good. But the different thing I thought he did that was really funny was there's some taxidermy things that come to life, which is really creepy.
Well, you know,
like squirrels or something,
Yeah, taxidermy, like the whole Psycho thing. Taxidermy.
Well, I brought that up. I was like, we were talking about how just the idea of things that sort of are dead but are created to look like they're alive are just creepy in themselves. And that was Norman Bates' kind of hobby.
Yeah, that was such the clue that we all missed when we watched that movie for the first time.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing is the taxidermy were birds, and then there's a shot that Hitchcock does where he's eating the bird, well, the seeds. Norman is, but it's done at this angle where it looks like he's like a bird, pecking down and eating the seeds.
Yes, I know what shot you're talking about.
Yeah, it's so brilliant.
It's so brilliant. But yeah, that could be an idea too. Is like a do like a base something on Psycho, but I don't know, find a way of retelling the story in an interesting way. Like maybe do it from the mother's point of view or something. Norman!
I was talking to Chris and he was like, I got to drive my mom somewhere. I'm like, and he always calls her Mrs. Bates. Or Miss, yeah. And I'm like, so he was like saying, I got to take her somewhere. I was like, oh, it's driving Mrs. Bates.
Yeah.
So almost like driving Miss Daisy, but do it like horror.
Yeah.
Like that, that's another thing that people always say, like take two movies and throw them together and see what comes out of that. Psycho meets Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it, and they always tell you that's a good way to pitch a screenplay.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, we should do pitches in another episode.
Oh, yeah.
But the idea is, and I don't know. Does TV Guide still exist?
You know, it's so weird that you asked that because I was just wondering that myself the other day. I'm
really?
Like, does TV Guide still exist?
I don't know. I mean, I used to see it in the grocery store when you would be right about to buy your stuff, but I don't think I've seen it there.
Yeah. I mean, magazines don't really, they do exist, but.
Magazines are really expensive now, too.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, they're like $15, $16 or more. For a magazine.
Oh yeah, like the Rolling Stone special.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of all they do now.
But I'm bringing up TV Guide because it used to be the way you would know if your pitch works. They always would say, think of the TV Guide blurb.
Oh right,
and your story, your book story should be able to be written in that blurb. And if you can't, you don't know your story enough.
I know, and that was one of the most frustrating things I ever tried to. It's so hard
it's really hard.
It's very hard to blurb your own. Like I'm finishing up my novel, and I'm more scared about writing the blurb than like actually finishing it.
Yeah, because it is the first thing people read, and you want to make sure it captures everything, and so you try to put in more, but that doesn't always help.
It's also a good idea to have someone edit your blurb.
That's true.
Or look at it, because I don't know about you, but I tend to undersell my stuff. And because I'm like, oh, I don't want to sound like this is the greatest thing, and kind of play it down. And that's probably not a good idea for selling something.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think so. I don't think Dale Carnegie
no would recommend that.
So let's end, and I want to bring this up because a lot of times, and you kind of brought it up now, but when you get an idea, do you think you should keep it to yourself or tell people about it? I have my own theory about it, but I'd love to hear yours.
Is anyone interested? That's the question. I would tell, like if I've talked to my husband Joe about it, and he'll be like, whatever you want to do. he's actually come to me with some ideas that have been pretty good, and I have no problem with telling someone about it. I don't feel like anyone's going to steal my idea.
No, but I'm talking about the energy.
Oh, the energy, yeah.
Because to me, I have this great idea, and then when I start telling people, and maybe if they don't react the way I hope they'd react, because in my head I'm like, oh, I know this is going to work. I know this is good. And then I tell someone, and they're looking at me blankly, like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
then I lose that.
That's happened to me before, and that's why you don't want to share too prematurely.
Right.
Sometimes, like, oh, I have this really good idea, but maybe you're just not you don't have your pitch down.
Right.
And then someone's like, no, I don't really get that. But then you do it, and it's like, or else you say, oh yeah, maybe they're right. And then someone else does it, and they're like, oh, I thought this really great idea, this really great movie. And they're like, that was my idea.
Yeah.
Ideas do float around the ether.
Yeah. There's Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a book called Big Magic, and she talks about that ideas. She talks about them as being like a living thing that is searching to basically become something, to be brought into the world. And if it pesters you and you don't do anything about it, it's moving on.
I definitely believe that. And
Me too.
When I did my film, The Weirdness, which is kind of unfinished, I've seen so many, and I'm not saying they stole from me, but I've seen so many other films that are so much like my film, like Stranger Things. It almost had an exact scene with the freight elevator that I used. Like some of the imagery was so similar to my idea. And there was I was watching another film, I forget what it was, that was in the same vein, and then a movie, I mean a TV series that I absolutely loved was Dark, that German,
yes,
that was so good. And there was a lot, and that was brilliant. They did that brilliantly, but there were a lot of things in that were like, oh, that's kind of like what I was doing with my thing, but it wasn't quite, I didn't have it quite on that level. And so I think that's very interesting how ideas are formed. So I would say, if you share your idea with a friend, first of all, be careful who you share with, because there are the Debbie Downers out there who like, I don't like that idea. Share with someone who's generally positive about these things, but you may be ahead of the curve and they might not get your idea because it needs to be done. So you don't always want to be chasing an idea. That's what's great about doing something. You can tap into something much more original. So never hold back just because, well, that's not popular right now. Like haunted house stories aren't popular. It's been done. No, it can always be reinvented.
And, especially if you have a following, that was Grady Hendrix has a following. He did a haunted house story, but he did it differently. Like, he didn't do it like ghosts, like you would think. And he reads like all that stuff, the paperbacks from hell, like he does all his research and knows what's.
Yeah, he knows the genre.
He knows the genre really well, and he knows what's been done to death, and he knew how to do something that was different. So that's what if you read a lot, you're going to know what's been done and how you could do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. You got me thinking a lot about different ideas. I think it's fun. It's fun to play with ideas, and it's also fun to challenge yourself to write something against type or like it would be challenging for me to do like research and write something that was like, if I, like sometimes you attend, not that I attended too many, but like writers workshops, and you pick out something from the hat, you have this idea and you got to marry it with this idea, like write a murder mystery about a football team. That would be very challenging for me because I know nothing about football. But then it kind of gets me thinking, how would I approach something that I don't know a lot about? And, I would find something about it that maybe I would find interesting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it also might be beneficial that you don't know football, because somebody who does might put in so much stuff that really doesn't matter because they're like, oh, I want to make sure everybody knows I know football.
Yeah.
Like you want to pepper it in there so it gives you the flavor of football, but you don't want just like this complete, guide to football. That's not why I'm reading this. I'm reading this for the mystery.
Right.
So I don't think people should fear going after something that they don't know completely.
Yeah.
You can learn it as much as you want, but you don't need to put all that in there. It just helps you be a little bit more realistic when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and get someone who really knows football to read it and fix all your
that's also true.
Mistakes.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think ideas are just so much fun, but it can be overwhelming, like mentally for me, because I get obsessed with an idea to the point where like I'm always thinking about it.
But that's good.
It is, but it also like makes me not do. I've been good though recently, but like I'll forget to put the trash out or something.
Oh, like that. Oh, yeah.
Like my life just goes all sideways because I'm thinking too much about a story or a video I'm going to shoot.
Yes, I do that all the time. But when as far as writing it, you have to be obsessed with it to actually get the job done on some level. So It's got to really turn you on, like enough to explore it and be interested. And I think that also comes from the characters. Like, if you're interested in the characters and always find that conflict, which is why families are always great to write about, because there's always conflicts in families.
Exactly. If you have your own way of finding an idea, let us know. You can go to the Bookworms Instagram and let us know. Do we want to say anything about the horror issue? So that should be coming out.
The Halloween issue?
Yeah, the horror issue. Duh. The Halloween issue. Yes.
Yes. That is coming out in early October.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully the first week of October. That's the plan. And it's going to have all kinds of Halloween flavor and fun with stories and essays and artwork and cool things like that.
Yeah, and if you haven't picked up issue 1 and 2, you can go to the Etsy link in the show notes.
We only have a few left for the first issue.
Yeah, the first issue's literally almost sold out, so better hurry up and pick that up. All right, until next week. Have a good week.
You
Regina.
too. Have a great week. Very productive. And come up with some good ideas. And if you want to share them with me, I'll always be positive.
All right.
Okay.
You too.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Bookworms Horror Podcast. All our links are in the show notes. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Bookworms is a Guerrilladelphia production.